Hello everyone and welcome to this week's edition of A Slice of History with the Butterfly Princess. This week I'm reading you another article from the January 2025 edition of the BBC History magazine. This week I'm reading you an article about that has been written by various historians who have nominated their choice for the greatest US president. So we have a few nominations here which have been nominated by various historians. So this article, these miniature articles have been written by various authors that have been featured in this the January 2025 edition of the BBC History magazine. So first we have George Washington. Now this has been he has been nominated by a gentleman called Thomas King. Thomas King is the author of various books, including Thomas Jefferson, a biography of spirit and flesh. So George Washington, he was in office between the years of 1789 and 1990, between 1789 and 1797, and he had no party affiliation. So in 1789, the newly independent nation desperately needed a leader who would put the good of the Republic before personal power. And in its first president, argues Thomas King, that is exactly what it got. George Washington was the first president in US history. Now I'm nominating him as the best too. I'm basing this on his success as a leader, his ability to negotiate conflicts in his administration, and most importantly, the example he sets for future presidents. Americans at the time of the Revolutionary War were met with the idea of the virtuous Roman general Caesarion. Washington was no perfect man, of course, and he like many elite Southern Americans, he was a slave owner. But in politics, he came the closest to manifesting the reputation, the Republican ideal of any American president. Washington became president after serving as the commander of the American army during the Revolutionary War. His leadership of the army was not uniformly positive, but his tenacity ultimately led to a successful outcome in the conflict with Britain. Many suspected he might simply remain in the position as a kind of benevolent American autocrat, but he resigned from the army in late 1783, returning to his Mount Vernon home in Virginia. Befitting the respect that he commanded, Washington was chosen to preside over the Constitutional Convention of 1787 when the US Constitution was drafted. Then he became the first president of the US to be elected under the Constitution of 1789, the unanimous vote of the Electoral College. Washington dealt with major political conflicts in his administration, especially between the Treasury Secretary Alexander Hamilton and the Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson, who bitterly disagreed over economic policy and the direction of the new republic. Washington was largely, if not completely, able to raise above the bickering and always believed that the republic and its leaders needed to manually census for the public good. He essentially reached up to the minority religious groups such as Jews to ensure them a fair place in the Republic. Washington was not required to step down after his second term, but he did so once again to manifest the idea that the public servants who did not want or need to hold on to power indefinitely. The next nomination is Abraham Lincoln. Now, he has been nominated by Richard Caldine, and he's the author of The Village of Righteous Strife, how warring religious nationalists sparked Lincoln's Union. Abraham Lincoln was US president from between the year 1861 to 1865, and he was a Republican. Boldly self-confident and acute political radar and an ability to connect with ordinary people. In his own era, Abraham Lincoln acquired a mythical status as the saviour of the United States. The great, and his death from a shot fired on Good Friday saw him canonised as the martyr of the glorious Union. Yet even stripping away the myth, most scholars still ranked him the best American president. When Lincoln took office, 7 slaveholding Confederate Civil War followed. Inexperienced in executive and military leadership, the wartime president faced sustained criticism but drew on formidable self-resilience and physical strength. He grew in office. Essential to his power was nationalism, wisdom, political shrewdness, and skill in communication. The American Republic's unique mission, Lincoln's insisted laying its ideological thought on liberty and equal opportunity. During the war, his nationalism fused with a deepening religious faith. He came to see that preserving the Union's Congo demanded ending human bondage and giving the vote to black soldiers. Lincoln shrewdly calculated the Union's properties, controlling the rich resources of the Upper South, securing international support, preserving a military plan that played to the Union's strengths, while exploiting the enemy's limitations and mobilising the human and natural resources of the country. Leadership demanded the deft handling of the levers of power. He controlled his party and broadened the coalition of Union loyalists. He mastered his cabinet and Congress, though he was initially less confident with the military. A strong sense of worth meant he rarely stood on his dignity. Equally, his mental fortitude forged through dark passages of depression gave him resilience in extreme adversity. Sensitive to public opinion, Lincoln. 1 minute, I can't.
To know the careful, it'll do the get in touch with our base and do the paperwork.
About that. Lincoln recognised the growing war awareness threatened the Union, causing the weary prose of his memorable public addresses. He used no speech writing. In skillful use of the actual sense of humour, he touched the nerve of ordinary people believing in their educated reason. Lincoln is the only president to have wrestled with civil war. Could any other have done it so well? A minute. The next president we have is Teddy Roosevelt, and he has been nominated by Jennifer Wright, who is a popular historian and author of Madame Rosetel, The Life and Death of Resident of New York's most fabulous, fearless and influential emotionalist. So she's nominated Teddy Roosevelt, who was the president of the US from the year 1901 to 1909, and he was a Republican. There were dual presidents, and there was Teddy Roosevelt. And he had always had the backs of working Americans. If Teddy Roosevelt had been the president, not been the president, he would really have been one of the most interesting men to ever live. The 26th president was a cattle rancher, a taxidermist, a Brazilian explorer, and an amateur boxer. An historian who wrote The Naval War of 1812 and a Nobel Peace Prize winner for his help in bringing the end to the Russo-Japanese War. Admittedly, he did not end the Civil War like Lincoln, but Lincoln did not take a bullet to the chest and still finishing a campaign speech as Roosevelt did. When Lincoln took a bullet, he famously died. Prior to being president, Roosevelt was a war hero. He was known for his prominent role with the Rough Riders during the Spanish-American War. The group of volunteer cavalrymen were comprised of anyone who could ride a horse well. This meant that polar playing sections of New York families served alongside coal miners and Native Americans. The notion of a country in which all people could thrive, work together, and have great open space in which to thrive would go on to become defining aspects of Roosevelt's presidency. After succeeding to office in 1901, he increasingly promoted the idea of a square deal for every man, big or small, rich or poor. That meant breaking up some of the big business that had dominated the Gilded Age and legalising a co-worker strike to ensure the public's interest was protected. Roosevelt was on the side of the workers. A square deal also meant protecting consumers. In 1906, Teddy Roosevelt lobbied for Congress to pass the Pure Food and Drug and Meat Inspectors Act. The meat portions of that perhaps a nod to the fact that the Upton Sinclair's novel The Jungle, which depicted unsanitary standards in the US meat packing industry, has been sterilised the previous year before being published as a book in February 1906. It was also a Roosevelt Bathurst that the Forest Service was created. Roosevelt, who was known as the conservative president, was passionate about nature. He used his presidential power to establish 230 million acres of public land that could not be exploited. His presidency was defined by the notion of creating an America where the common men might find prosperity, safety, and pleasure. It's not essential that the president's personality matches his accomplishments. Plenty of dual presidents have accomplished some great things, but Teddy Roosevelt was a rare case where the man matched the grandeur of the office. And look, your kid doesn't go to bed hugging a James K. Pope bear. And she's referring back to that because the cyber teddy bear is actually named after Theodore Roosevelt. Next, we have Franklin D. Roosevelt, who has been nominated by A1 Morgan, and they are the author of FDR Transforming the Presidency and Realigning America. So Franklin D. Roosevelt was the US president between the years of 1933 and 1945, and he was a Democrat. In guiding the US through the Great Depression and Second World War, Franklin D. Roosevelt, or FDR as he was known, transformed the presidency hereafter a relatively small institution into the modern office that is the front of national leadership. Having to overcome physical disability after polio left him paralysed from the waist down at age 39 made his achievements all the more remarkable. Assuming office in 1933 and the US's worst slump, FDR failed to effect full recovery until war spending reward rugged prosperity, but otherwise enjoyed unmatched domestic success. His New Deal programme rescued the banking system from meltdown, enabled industry workers to form unions that bargained for better pay and conditions, and created a new welfare state. It forged a working class coalition of urban multi-ethnic voters that helped Roosevelt to win an unprecedented 4 terms in office. In 2 terms, Kowinski limit was referred. A 2-term constitutional limit was ratified in 1951 and confirmed the Democrats into the majority party for the next half century. So even though Roosevelt served 4 terms, because in America, each presidential term is for 4 years long, unlike in the UK, where each government term in the UK is 5 years. Each presidential term in America is 4 years long, and they can only serve 2 terms. Once a president has served 2 terms in office, they cannot stand again. Roosevelt judicial appointments participated in a constitutional revolution whereby the Supreme Court eventually accepted federal regulations of private enterprises as valid. An outstanding communicator, he uplifted national spirits through his speeches and broadcasts. Finally, he formed a memorable political partnership with First Lady Eleanor Roosevelt to offset his protagonism. As wartime commander-in-chief, FDR set spectacular high production goals for America's defence industries that ensured the Allies were far better equipped than their ex-enemies. He overruled his generals' plans for a 1943 invasion of France as premature, then prolonged a reluctant Winston Churchill into agreeing for D-Day invasions in 1944. The driving force behind the creation of the United Nations Organization in 1945, he nevertheless regarded great power collaboration as essential for sustainable peace. Accordingly, he accommodated Joseph Stalin's demands for Soviet control of Eastern Europe to maintain good relations. For critics, this encouraged Stalin's insatiable expansion, but FDR saw no alternative with the region already under Red Army occupation. Roosevelt's sudden death while still in office in 1945 meant that history would never know if he could have preempted the wartime alliance's rapid descent into Cold War. FDR's record has some significant shortcomings, noticeably his limited advancement of African American civil rights and his complacency in the worst federal abuse of citizen rights in history in signing an exclusion and executive ordering for 1942 authorising relocation of approximately 120,000 Japanese Americans in internment camps. Nevertheless, his positive accomplishments were arguably far more significant. They justify his remembrance as America's greatest president. Next, we have Lyndon B. Johnson, and he's been nominated by Clifford Williamson, and Clifford Williamson is a lecturer in modern British and American history at Bath Spa University. Lyndon B. Johnson was a Democrat, and he was he served in the office of President of the US between the years of 1963 and 1969. Power is where power goes was the mantra of Lyndon Baines Johnson from his early years as a New Deal bureaucrat and teacher through to his time as president in the US. LBJ, as he was often known, was a commanding and imitating figure who handed out the Johnson treatment. In his pursuit of power and change in America, a tall man, he loomed over whoever he was seeking to impress, frightened or into supporting him or his politics. LBJ was a member of Congress from 1937 until 1961. He graduated from the House to the Senate in 1948 and became a minority leader in 1955. His time in Congress would be key to his effectiveness as a president who used procedure, parentage, and his power of persuasion to break the entrenched opposition of, in particular, the Southern Democrats. He was selected as the running man to John F. Kennedy in 1960 and was raised to the presidency following the assassination of JFK in November 1963. Almost immediately, he proved his effectiveness by breaking the controversial criticism over tax cuts, and importantly, a Civil Rights Act, which was passed in 1964. In May, he launched his Great Society, a wide-ranging legislative programme where he claimed no child will go unfed and no youngster will go unschooled. There then followed a sort of initiatives, but leveled in scope the New Deal of his hero, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and in many cases suppressed it. Following the violent attacks on the peaceful Montgomery Civil Rights March, he would propose the 1965 Voting Rights Act that finally ended the poll tax, literacy tests, and the grandfather clauses that had hindered African Americans' political participation in endorsements. However, following a series of riots across the US, starting in Los Angeles in 1965, a growing white backlash would soon be palpable. It was something that not even the formidable political talent of Lyndon B. Johnson could stem. The South Vietnam, where it was becoming increasingly evident that the US had become embroiled in an unlit war, despite sending hundreds of thousands of US troops. Then in 1968, the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese shot the US by launching the Tet Offensive, a major escalation in the conflict in the face of sparring opposition to the war among the American people. Johnson decided not to seek re-election in that year's presidential election. It was a muted end to what had been a brilliant political career. Next one, we have Ronald Reagan, who was a Republican, and he was in office between the years of 1981 and 1989, and he has been nominated by a gentleman called Jeremy Black, and he is the author of books including The Cold War, A Military History, and A Brief History of America. So, ability and achievement came in many forms. The inventors and the explorers of the possibilities of politics and government win the most praise. But it is also necessary to honour the stabilisers. And Ronald Reagan, the much-mocked elderly ex-actor from California, was one of the greatest. America and the West were in grave difficulties at the end of the 1970s. Vietnam and Watergate had hollowed out confidence in American power and politics, and the two oil shocks of the 1970s had destabilised the economy and public finances, contributing to a sense of decline. At the end of the decade, the Iranian Revolution and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan took this misplays further. What might have come next was a matter of hazard, and indeed, in 1983, war between the Soviets and the West came very close. Debts had fallen and the Cold War reheated. Reagan proved an adaptive responder through cascade a warmonger for his reference to the Soviet evil empire and for the development of cruise and perishing missiles. He believed in negotiations from strength, a sense that inevitable fruits in the move towards a reduction of tensions from 1985. Just as Nixon had reduced out to most, so Reagan responded to Gorbachev. Earlier crises over Poland and Afghanistan were handled through measures short of war. So, for instance, the US supplied armaments to the Afghan resistance but didn't commit ground troops. The same policy of subversion rather than invasion was employed in Central American countries. The fall of the Soviet system suggested that the pressure of trying to match American military expenditure and economic development was potent, more so than the repeated moves into war. The use of troops frequently embroiled by presidents from 1991 onwards. In light of this, Reagan appears more valuable as a model than contemporary criticisms often allowed for. In domestic policy, Reagan pushed growth in the American economy, proved a clear contrast with the Soviet one, and was thus a more attractive partner for China. In social terms, Reagan was a libertarian, which would have jarred with the intolerance of many members of the modern Republican Party. Charismatic, a great communicator, able to take the pulse of the nation, a good delegator, and a man with a heart, Reagan was an attractive head of state and an accomplished leader. And the final nomination we have who is Barack Obama. Now, he was president of the US from the year 2009 to the year 2017, and he was a Democrat, and he has been nominated by a lady called Rebecca Brookman, who is the author of Massive Resistance in Southern Womanhood. Barack Obama became the nation's first African-American president 390 years after the first documented slave ship arrived in the controversial British colonies. Obama's identity should not eclipse his effectiveness. He oversaw the passage of urgent economic reforms, the first compressive healthcare law since Lyndon B. Johnson signed the 1965 Medicare and Medicaid Act. Obama expanded civil rights, reconsidered US foreign policy, and emphasized the fight against climate change. Obama's 2008 Yes We Can campaign centered his charisma and rhythmic skill. He tapped into widespread dissatisfactions with George W. Bush's administration aimed the Iraq War, the worldwide economic recession, prompting a hopeful and inclusive vision of the country. Once elected, he confronted the largest economic downturn since the 1930s. 1 month after Obama took office, in addition to offering financial bailouts for banks and the automotive industry, Congress passed an $800 billion stimulus package investing in infrastructure, education, and renewable energy. By the time Obama left office, unemployment had been cut in half. The Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, the administration's landmark achievement, outlawed health insurance discrimination based on pre-existing conditions and halved the number of uninsured Americans. The Obama administration strengthened civil rights by bolstering equal pay provisions, repealing the anti-LGBT Don't Ask, Don't Tell military policy, supporting marriage equality, and offering a path to work authorizations for undocumented minors. Confronted by an Republican Congress that rebuffed attempts at coalition building, the Obama administration increasingly relied on executive orders to effect political change. Obama raised the federal minimum wage, designed national monuments under a commission, and cut federal greenhouse gas emissions. Obama's policy saw the continuation of his predecessors. Military investment in the Middle East, which made critics question the Nobel Peace Prize he was awarded in 2009. However, he re-established diplomatic relations with Cuba after 54 years, and he brokered a new agreement on nuclear weapons development in Iran. Most constructive of all was his spotlight on the climate crisis, which enabled the breakthrough 2016 Paris Agreement. In the face of racial threats, birth risk conspiracies, and a controversial Barack Obama was a remarkable, effective president during political challenging times in the 21st century. So that concludes this week's edition of an extra a slice of history with the Butterfly Princess Show. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you can join me for next week's instalment. Bye for now.